And I want to really welcome this motion from the Independents, the Rural Independents today. It's refreshingly progressive and we will fully support it. The motion is unusual coming from the court as it does, in that it doesn't promote fossil fuels or LNGs or Barry Rowe or anything else. It's completely absent from it. And I'm delighted to see that, because it is progressive, and what it does is call for a reduction in the use of electricity by data centres. Gino's gone into that very thoroughly, but it also covers things like putting a cap on the revenues of the energy companies, and it details very clearly how the profits of the energy companies have skyrocketed out of control, no justification for them, but also calls for price controls, which is something that the government must look at. It just does not make sense, and I hear it from all the previous speakers calling for intervention in the market that has failed, the market that doesn't work anymore, and it just is the obstinacy of the government not to look at that in terms of making an intervention and putting a cap on energy prices in this country. And the other thing that it does is call very strongly for the implementation of a profit solidarity tax. Now, when are we going to, I'm going to ask the Minister directly, when is the government going to come back to us and talk about this? Because months ago it was mooted and the Taoiseach said we'd look at it. They're supposed to be looking at it in Europe, but it's lying there while the profits increase and the solidarity tax is lying in abeyance. I just want to talk a wee bit about what people before profit would do in terms of the energy sector. All of the above, and agree entirely with the motion from the Rural Independents, but we also believe, and we have a bill coming forward through the Dáil, that we need to renationalise the energy sector. And I'll just go over the arguments again. In the early years of the foundation of this state, when we had very, very little in terms of resources, finances coming into the country, we made a decision as a state that there were certain things we had to do. One was obviously create a housing stock and some kind of a health service, but crucially, in order to feed into that, we had to create an energy sector. And Ardna Crusha and the creation of the ESB and Bord na Móna were attempts by the state to have a not-for-profit mandate electricity system that would turn on the lights and power the entire state, and it did. And it did so in a progressive way. It did so by employing people in decent jobs, giving apprenticeships, keeping the lights on and providing power to every home business in the country at a very, very reasonable rate. And that reasonable rate was maintained because the ESB in particular had a not-for-profit mandate right up until 2001, when that was changed, when the energy sector was deregulated and it was thrown open Lana Whaile to competition in the open market. The not-for-profit mandate was removed, and now this country has one of the highest levels of energy costs to the consumer in the entire European Union. So we believe the renationalisation of the energy sector is the way to go, and the simple way of doing it is to remove that mandate from the ESB that they must return a profit, and therefore all of the rest of the businesses that are competing for profits would fade off into the background. And if they didn't, the state could buy them over and just have one company that delivered, produced and delivered the electricity to homes and businesses across the country. The other advantage of it, of course, in the current climate would be that it would take over the production of all offshore energy and all renewable energy power. And that would mean that renewable energy, a natural resource, would not be used as a for-profit tool by these greedy energy companies, but rather would be a resource for the people of this country, as a whole. I heard other people refer to it earlier on, but the Cost of Living Coalition has been a very important tool in putting these arguments to the ordinary people, to trade unions, to pensioners, to students, and bringing them together to have a loud voice that says to the government, we won't tolerate this. Now, I note there's been general strikes and protests right across Europe over the energy crisis and the cost of living. and the cost of living crisis for us here has not gone away, and the winter will be bitter and cold, and post-Christmas people were really going to feel the pinch. So to that end, we'll be out marching on the question of housing on the 26th of November with all of the groups I mentioned, but this campaign will continue right into the new year, into 2023, until this government begins to listen.
Thank you, Deputy.